And music's golden year of 1984, former Boomtown Rats vocalist Bob Geldof and Midge Ure, who was with Ultravox at that time, wrote and conceived of a song to raise money and awareness to fight the famine going on in Africa. And in that process, they changed the world, bringing together many of the great artists to record Do They Know It's Christmas, the first of our two-part documentary on the story of this #1 smash with those who were there in the room, next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Make sure to subscribe below, do that right now. We would love to have you be a part of this music community. Also check us out on Patreon to help us keep the music alive and we give you more insider videos. Every now and again, we get to do a really special video here on Professor of Rock and truly celebrate the healing power of music. To celebrate the holiday season here at Professor of Rock in one of the most trying years of our lifetime, we have a gift for anyone who believes that music can truly change the world. A two-part series on one of the biggest selling songs ever, the #1 smash, Do They Know It's Christmas, from my personal favorite year in all of music, 1984, written and conceived by Bob Geldof and Midge Ure, who were able to bring together the biggest acts from Sting to Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, Wham, U2, Phil Collins, Boy George, so many more. I was extremely fortunate to have an in-depth conversation with co-writer Midge Ure, who conveys the truly miraculous legend behind this song and how it continues to change the world and bring people together. So many miracles, so many great stories. You're going to love this. It's one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. And we have some appearances from other key contributors that were there in the room that sang on it. Again, this is a two-part series, episode 1 now and episode 2 tomorrow. Celebrate the holiday season and music's ability to heal the world as we go into this mini documentary. I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. You can go do a virtual 3D try-on at zenni.com to see how you look before you purchase. Go ahead and do that. Now, here is the in-depth story behind Do They Know It's Christmas.
Okay, then we're going to take you back to last year. In fact, the December of last year.
How did you get the call? What do you remember about Band-Aid and how that all came together?
Well, we've had time to discuss it now. And there's lots of things I don't remember. So I actually spoke to Midge and I said, how did we first meet? And he said, I don't know. I said, no, neither do I. Okay, so that's that.
It's Christmas time.
Bob saw the BBC TV reporter, Michael Burke, and he sees the famine that's going on in Ethiopia. And this was like biblical famine in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Nobody ever seen anything like this.
Paula, Bob's girlfriend, was co-hosting a music show in the north of England in Newcastle. And I was playing on the show. And I'd known Bob and Paula for a long time. And I was chatting to Paula, who was hugely pregnant. Bob was at home. Boomtown Rats were finished. He was house babysitting or whatever he was doing. And he called Paula and said, I've just seen this hideous thing. And she said, Midge is standing next to me. And she handed me the phone. And he said, look, I want to do something. I'm not in a position powerful enough to do anything. Will you help? Can we meet up when you get back? So we met up in London a couple of days later. And you have to kind of imagine this because it's really quite sad. There's two songwriters, two multi-platinum selling songwriters sitting together for 2 hours trying to figure out how we could generate income for this famine. And finally coming to the ultimate conclusion that we are absolutely useless at everything except maybe putting a good song together. So we decided to write a Christmas song, and a Christmas song specifically because this was October or something we were talking about this.
I read it was November 5th that you guys had that lunch meeting.
Let's hear. Thank you. I'm glad you know this stuff. So it was very tight. If you could get a #1 record in the UK charts just before Christmas, the charts freeze. So you can sell 2 or 3 times as many.
Christmas #1.
Christmas #1 always sells a lot more than any other #1. And we couldn't do a cover version of a standard Christmas song because 50% of the income goes to the songwriters. We had to write something and then donate the songwriting royalties. So I went home and wrote on my little Casio keyboard, came up with this Jingly Bells thing. And sent it to Bob on a cassette, who hated it. And then he came over.
He thought it sounded like the theme to Z Cars,
Z Cars, yeah. It's an old TV tune. It's nothing like that. But in Bob's head, That's what it was like. And he came to my place with a guitar. He's a left-handed guitarist, but he plays a right-handed guitar, and it was upside down. And he sang this thing at me, and every time he sang it was different. He was obviously just making this up. He had the bones of a set of lyrics. And I said, well, leave it with me, and I'll try and put this together, these things, these incompatible things. And I just finished building a studio in the bottom of a garden. So I went to the studio, and I spent 4 days playing all the instruments, building this thing up layer by layer, trying to get an arrangement built, putting in the middle eight, and trying to get this thing to work in some kind of order, because it starts with the clanging chimes of doom, this dark, ominous, moody, atmospheric, sad intro. But then it has to finish with this kind of sing-along thing at the end. And again, it's a song with no chorus. The hook comes at the very end of the song.
Right.
And at that point, it's too late. You've bought the record. I don't care whether you like it or not. That's the hook at the end, And it was just an odd construction. But we figured out that if we pulled in enough talented people to come and add their strengths to it, we might get ourselves a Christmas #1. It might generate £100,000. That's the number we had in our heads.
And of course, it generated a lot more than that.
It generated a lot more than that. There was the one day in the studio that everyone saw with all the artists here, and I'm behind the mixing desk 99% of the time trying to pull this thing together. And there was a moment when, after the 24-hour period recording all the vocals, which none of the artists had heard, because nobody could hear it until you walked into the studio.
Yeah.
It's something that we take for granted. You can email somebody a track and you can hear it and learn it, walk into the studio and sing your part. So they were working in Kool. So doing that, doing Phil Collins drums and mixing the record, because I had to be in the pressing plants by 8 o'clock the next morning.
And I read that Bob would keep coming in and saying, sing this part, and you'd be like, Bob, no, tell me about that.
Well, Bob's sense of melody is all over the shop. So you'd have, Boy George or somebody in there, or whoever, Tony Hadley, standing there singing these things. And Bob's going, no, sing it like, it won't be snowing out because Christmas time. You'd go, what are you singing? That's not what we wrote, But there's a divide between. I was comfortable behind the desk, and Bob's brilliant at rounding people up and geeing them up and getting them doing things. But God, thank God they didn't listen to him and his direction on the vocals. I think straight after our meeting, he lived in Chelsea, so he lived near King's Road in Chelsea, and he bumped into Gary Kemp, from Spandau Ballet.
Yeah,
and then walked around the corner. He bumped into Simon Le Bon, like you do, two of the biggest artists in the UK at the time, and of course. That's where Bob starts his trickery. He's going, well, Duran have said they're doing it, so Spandau, Duran, you've got to. So all of a sudden there was a competition there. The big worry was that we hadn't actually spoken to any adults about where and when this was going to happen. So we hadn't, talked to a manager who might have written down the date and the time and the place. So on that Sunday morning or whatever it was, Bob and I are standing outside this very empty studio on a cold, wet morning without a clue who was going to turn up. Gosh. We're thinking, if I was them and I hadn't written it down, I'd have forgotten. You'd be lying in bed in Germany somewhere after a wild night out doing a TV show, whatever. And they all turned up. They all turned up.
We come from? Yeah, we've just come from Germany. How did you come to be in the first place? In a group? Yeah, I'm in a group, so they invited us all along.
Such a moment, right, of music can change the world. And that was kind of the beginning of that. Like punk, I think, brought that about. I was talking to Mike Peters, The Alarm, and he said...
he's a great guy, Mike.
And he's like, people talk about negativity of punk. Punk is positive. What brought about Live Aid and brought about all those changes.
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, punk, it put music on a different level. It sort of gave it a different face, a different value. And I think it gave a lot of young kids a tremendous sense of hope.
Definitely.
That, blimey, if you can form a band, then so can we.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And even coming from the working class and doing what their dad did, and their dad did, is like, punk gave him that, like, we can break out.
You can do it. I mean, the going to the Band-Aid thing, I mean, that was, I think it was Steve, Gary and Martin were on the King's Road in Chelsea when they met up at Geldof. And he said, guys, I really want you to be on this record. There's a terrible tragedy going on in Ethiopia. No one even knew at the time. And so they said, yeah. And we were in Germany with the Duranis the night before. And we'd all been on the proper. I mean, serious. So we're all due to go in and do the song. And we didn't think, we thought, okay, no one's going to know anything. So we've all turned up at the airport. We're all looking dreadful, And someone said, look, there's 300 screaming girls out. There's TV cameras and press and everything. So we're like, where's the nearest toilet? Get the hairspray out. John, where's the bags?
Yeah.
And then we went to the studio and Psalm West, Trevor Horn's studio. And
that you'd worked with before on
Yeah.
Extinction. You asked Trevor Horn to produce it at the time, but he was booked up and he said, I'll have time in about 6 weeks. But you guys said, we've got to get it
Bob
faster
wanted
than that.
Trevor because Trevor was the hot producer at the time. He was the guy
He'd
to go
had
to.
3 #1 hits with Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Yeah, but Trevor takes forever to make stuff. So it would have been an Easter record. And that's no good at all. It had to be done quickly. As you said, 20 days between the meeting and coming up with the idea and executing the idea. So it was short time, but he gave us 24 hours in his studio. And there's a moment on the making of video where Trevor comes in and he said, I've got this idea of doing a madrigal, a kind of, do they know, do they know, do they? All these voices all overlap. And he spent an hour doing this. And I'm sitting watching the clock going, oh my God, it's an hour I've not got left. It's an hour just been eaten up. And I had to say to Trevor, great idea, but we can't do it today. We've got to get this done,
Yeah.
So he very kindly said, yeah, point taken, stood back.
What was great was the fact that Kool and the gang had just arrived to do a tour. So you can come down as well, get on the chorus. It's like there's so many people that were there.
There was a lot of people that you asked to show up, like David Bowie was supposed to sing the first line. He and Paul McCartney weren't able to move
I
their
think that was
schedules around.
more in our heads. I don't think there was ever an approach made. We just thought, wouldn't it be great to have Bowie do the opening line, because you imagine him, you can hear him singing it now, But no, he did us a big favour afterwards. He did the announcement for the first showing of the video. They gave us a 5-minute slot before Top of the Pops, which at the time was getting to like 20 million people.
Yeah.
So the BBC gave us this 5-minute slot, and we need someone with the gravitas to give this the seriousness that it needed. And nobody more powerful than Bowie, of course.
It would be wonderful if you could all buy copies of this record over the next period through Christmas. If you can't afford them, club together with somebody else to buy a copy. You know that the money will go to the Ethiopians. Thank you.
Boy George sings the last line. Tell me real quick the Boy George story.
Oh, it's funny.
There's a guy that wasn't even there.
Well, he wasn't there. And we didn't notice, and it nothing to do with George. You notice George wherever you are. But we were so frantic about trying to get all of this done. Poor old Phil Collins popping his head up every 2 hours going, are you ready for me yet? And I'm going, it's another 20 minutes. And Bob noticed that he didn't see George. So he went to the drummer who was there and asked him where he was. He said, he's in New York. He said, well, what's he doing in New York? He said, I don't know. He must have forgotten to come. So Bob found the hotel that he was staying in. Mm-hmm. And woke George up. He said, what's going on? He said, it's the Band-Aid record. George said, who's there? He said, every f***er beat you. He said, He said, well, I've missed it now, haven't I? He said, no, you haven't. He said, there's a Concorde. It's leaving at such and such a time. He said, get on Concorde. And he did. He got up and he bought a ticket. Nobody bought it for him. He bought a ticket and he arrived that night in the UK about 8 o'clock in the evening. And he came in and he was a bit hoarse and, a bit hungover, very George. And he stood behind the mic and he said, can someone get me a brandy? And I pressed the button in the intercom and said, you'll have to pop next door and buy one, George. I said, there's nothing here, And then he opened his mouth and he sang like an angel.
In our world of plenty.
But he had to be there. He couldn't not be there,
Oh, yeah. Well, Kool and the gang show up. They were a U.S. act, but they're on the same label as Boomtown Rats, and they happen to be in town. But the other thing is Marilyn showed up, as I read, uninvited. Yeah. And then Neil from the Young Ones. What the heck?
Oh, that was
Which is
funny.
like when Dan Aykroyd showed up to We Are the World, which is funny. But you changed the lyric from Ethiopia to Africa because it just didn't play when you said there'll be snow.
Bob, his melody is almost as good as his timing. So, you know, and there won't be snow in Ethiopia this Christmas. It just does not work, no matter how you try and squeeze it in. So it was too cumbersome. So we just thought, no, there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas, which of course isn't true, but who cares? We weren't going for geographical points, you know.
It really even wasn't about the song, it was about the movement.
It wasn't the best song in the world, it was okay.
But it was the idea of bringing people together.
Sure.
They've recorded Do They Know It's Christmas, 3 other versions, which all went to #1. But just incredible that music had that power, because it kind of felt like in the 1960s, music had that power to change the world. Motown was happening, the civil rights movement, and the British invasion, the Beatles coming over after JFK had been assassinated, giving hope to America, and the UK was just opening things up, rewriting the rules about what music could be. And that kind of seemed like the 70s came in and the excess started happening a little bit, drugs and things like that, and the commercialization of music. You guys brought that back in the 80s, using music to create awareness. And that was just incredible. I want to ask you about the Bono part, because he sang that line and a lot of people didn't like that line. Tell me about that.
Well, the line is, you know, and thank God tonight it's them instead of you, which sounds brutal. But Bob wrote the line and he wanted it to be brutal. He said, no, rather it's them than you. But thank God it's them and not you. You know, just showing how close it could be. Things can turn on the toss of a coin, you know, things can change for us. We live in a Western world where we're reasonably safe and, you know, we're getting, you know, reasonably good lifestyle and whatever. And it doesn't take an awful lot to take that away, you know, for that to crumble. And we could find ourselves in the same kind of situation. No food, no prospects, no future, stuck in the middle of a civil war, you know, a war-torn country. All of that's like it could happen to anybody. And Bono said, I'm really uncomfortable singing this. You know, and Bob explained it to him and he said, okay. But when I had sung that line with a guide vocal for everyone to hear the song, I just sung it on a lower octave, just, you know, tonight, thank God it's them instead of you. And when it came around, Bono, without being prompted, just kind of went for what felt comfortable to him.
Thank God it's them instead of you.
You know, after this discussion about the line, and we stood back and went, God, where did that come from? Because it wasn't just the power of the line. It was the feeling behind it. And it's not like somebody had said, you've really got to scream this out. It was heartfelt. And that one line, at that key moment, turned the entire song round. Up to that part, it was drony, it was sad, it was atmospheric, it was, you know, it was kind of textural. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing just went into a whole different level. And that was just a bit of magic that happened, you know. Had it been someone else trying to sing that line, it might not have had the same effect.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to watch episode 2, which is going to be released tomorrow, and thereafter we'll include a link in the description. The next episode will get into more stories from the session and the legacy of the song, including remembering David Bowie and George Michael and how this song led to We Are the World and Live Aid and so much more. Leave us a comment on this album. Share your memories. Tell us your stories. How has music changed your life? Either this song or any of these artists. Get a copy of the song at our Amazon links below. You can also hear it in the playlist below. We invite you to subscribe right now. We would love to have you be a part of this community. It's very important stuff. Also, check us out on Patreon. Help us keep the music alive. Until next time, truly, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.